Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Traasdahl. He is the founder and CEO of Crisp to discuss working with brands to reduce food waste while increasing profitability through the use of technology as we navigate through COVID-19. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thank you so much.
So why are food supply chains struggling to pivot during COVID-19? It seems as if many other industries have been able to pivot quite quickly. Why food service is having an issue?
Yeah, it's surprising, right? That we have empty shelves, and at the same time you see farmers pouring milk out, and we see a lot of food waste at the same time as there's a tremendous amount of demand for the product. So, but it's also, this is a supply chain that was broken before the outbreak. You have a third of all the food that's produced in the world goes to waste before it reaches a consumer. So a third of all food that's produced doesn't even reach a consumer. So it's and then you put a tremendous amount of stress on this food supply chain, and a lot of change both in consumer behavior and logistics challenges and all of that. And that's when you see what you saw in the last couple of months here.
So is the disconnect between food supply and demand anything new? How does sustainability and combating food waste come into play here?
Yeah, I think that's always been a big imbalance in the system. There is a huge web of companies all over the world trading with each other in order to bring food to the consumer. Often it goes through 8, 10, 15 steps from production till it reaches a consumer, and the complexities are enormous. So when you get these external shocks that we have had now in the last 3 months, then the system can't handle it.
How do we advance the food industry to be more resilient, and not only in response to the current pandemic, but for future challenges? What kinds of technologies are you looking at?
Look, I think it's the last industry to go through this technology revolution that most other industries has happened in most other industries. It's a lot of old school systems, old Excel sheets, telefax, phone calls, emails, and the whole industry needs to be modernized. The innovation in the food industry kind of happened in the 70s and 80s when you got the barcodes and all of that, but there's not that much that have happened lately. So we believe that there needs to be an open infrastructure that everybody knows what's going on, and they can trade much easier with each other. Information travels super fast through this, so everybody can optimize their business based upon it. So it's an industry that's ripe for a lot of disruption.
Let's talk about some of those new technologies. I think blockchain would be one of the most perfect examples. If you can track food from farm to table, think of all the diseases that can be tracked. I mean, we've seen it happen before, where you get an E. coli breakout somewhere, it's in some food chain's lettuce, and nobody can determine where it is. I would think blockchain is probably one of the most obvious answers, at least from that perspective.
I think the ability to track and trace is incredibly important, and blockchain can be one of them. It's harder to use blockchain for physical products than for digital products because there is no actual tag that you can use to track it. So but the tracing and traceability is incredibly important. But there's also just information to travel through to supply chain. We saw this big shift from restaurants into grocery retail instead. And it takes a long time for that information to actually travel back in the supply chain. So the faster that all information like that can go back to the actual producers, the faster they can adjust their production. But now, as I said, there's many different steps it needs to jump through. And then also need to deal with Mother Nature here as well. That's the big part of the food industry as well. It's actually dependent on weather and seasons and imports and exports, and there's a lot of complexity. And the only way that you can really solve that is to have real-time information for everybody. But I agree, the tracing and tracking is a big piece of it.
So then what's the ultimate answer? An open infrastructure? Is that the kind of technology that you're pursuing?
Yeah, I think it is this cloud-based infrastructure, get everything out of Excels and silos and telefaxes and phone calls and into and open infrastructure where people have access to information. And then there is a big push, as we know, in the technology industry around artificial intelligence and machine learning and algorithms that can solve things that humans can't solve, and the ability to put together information across multiple companies and multiple systems, and then run forecasting algorithms, for instance, which is one of the products that we have. Customer insights, what are consumers actually buying now after the outbreak? When we work from home, we're probably both at our homes right now, right? And it's a very different consumer patterns now than it was before. So you need real-time information, and then you need these algorithms that can understand what's going on.
Those are all great points, Ade. Thank you so much for joining us on Trade Talks.
Great, thank you, pleasure.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.